Powered by passion. It's National Auto Care's Fixed Ops 5 with your host, National Fixed Operations Training Manager, Corey Smith.
Welcome to Fixed Ops 5. I'm your host, Corey Smith, National Fixed Operations Training Manager with National Auto Care. I'm being joined today by Sean Reyes, Chief Marketing Officer with Recall Masters again. Before we get into this episode, Sean, I kind of want to recap the last episode you were on. We talked about, recall crisis. We talked about who's to blame, OEM, consumers, or dealers. What does a dealer assume about a recall? And we got a lot of people that emailed me after that episode and said, hey, I've got a bunch of questions. So I thought it'd be a good idea to have a follow-up on what we had with the first podcast that you and I did. So let's just jump right into it. One question came in on the sales front. Inventory is down. So what do we need to do about pre-owned inventory?
Right. So I think everybody, especially in the franchise world, is aware that you cannot sell a new vehicle with an open recall. But when it comes to used cars, it's a bit confusing. I think at the end of the day, the federal government allows a dealership to sell a used car with an open recall, but at the state level, they're still at risk of product liability laws. So for the moment, it's legal to sell a used car with an open recall, but you're still on the hook for a lawsuit under those state liability programs, which could be a problem. If an injury or death occurs as a result of that open recall. So when dealers ask me, or they say, hey, we sign disclosures, we have these buyers sign disclosures. Those disclosures really address lemon laws, and that prevents a consumer from returning that vehicle and asking for a refund because they say they weren't aware of the recall. Right. But when it comes to product liability, there's still those same signed disclosures can be used as evidence or as an admission of guilt that the dealership knowingly and willingly sold a dangerous vehicle with a dangerous defect. And so you're kind of on the hook for that. And I encourage every dealer to speak with their counsel to discuss, from a legal standpoint, what's the best course of action. But yeah, that's a fact. So
the dealer, a lot of dealers, the pre-owned superstore, or even the dealer has to have some kind of a process where before they get these frontline ready, that all the recalls are up to date on this vehicle before they sell it to stay away from that liability issue.
No, that's right. And we're working also with, again, our franchise dealers that carry a lot of off-brand on their inventory to work together with their neighboring franchise dealers to get those vehicles repaired. In fact, we have a report called the Market Smart Report, which will show you all the vehicles in your PMA that are of brand sitting on either an independent lot or an off-brand lot that you can repair. So we're trying to really encourage the dealer community to share that inventory with their neighbors to get those vehicles repaired. I mean, we all win with that. So
right. So let's get into the this Ralph Nader and the Corvair incident of the 60s, where the quote unquote, I thought the system was working. Can you elaborate on that question?
Yeah, I mean, it was, really for a long time. I think the transparency for auto manufacturers and the dealers to alert NHTSA that, these vehicles were have a manufacturing defect and here's the repair. And that was really kind of to address, the openness that manufacturers wanted to have with their consumers. And like in the UK, I'll put it to you this way. If you're in the United Kingdom, right, in England, you can't even get your vehicle registered if you've got an open recall. Really? They put it on the consumer or the vehicle owner to repair that recall prior to it's being registered. But they're not going to do that here in the United States. There's too many politics at play. They'd rather point that problem back to the manufacturer and less on the consumer. So That's why we've kind of more or less piled up recalls upon recalls, and these trends with the volume of recalls, the complexity of these investigations that need to occur by NHTSA. That's really kind of what's happened, and why a system that was working no longer seems to work
Right.
as efficiently. It's just purely from a volume standpoint and the complexity of these recalls. So you can't blame the government. That's why we don't get involved with finger pointing. I think at the end of the day, it's all of our problem. Consumers, vehicle owners, any of us that share the road, manufacturers, the dealership community, we're all responsible for attending to this problem. So I don't think this system's completely destroyed, but we are reaching a very critical mass at the moment.
Right. And then people need to take it seriously too. And so, I mean, obviously, I think dealers have a huge resource on, how to repair these vehicles, and a process of where they need to go if they're not the authorized dealer. But what should the priority really be when it comes to getting these recalls done for the dealers before they get them on the front line?
Right. So I'm not a big proponent of legislation and regulations and other government mandates. I'm more, it's funny, we're in the middle of this pandemic and having a similar discussion regarding vaccines, but I'm more of from the standpoint of trying to share with the dealer community what the opportunities are. And for consumers, the same is true. If I really want to compel consumers to take action, I think I want to encourage the simplicity of attending to a recall, and creating a better dealership climate or environment or experience that a consumer actually is more interested in attending to the recall. I think right now the average consumer sees a recall as somewhat of a nuisance.
Right.
They're not angry as much as they are just kind of annoyed by having to attend to it. But I think that's in general, the average consumer really doesn't really want to service their vehicle. So that's okay. I mean, that's nobody's fault, but it's a necessity, right? So to protect your vehicle asset, the average consumer should be not only attending to oil changes and various regular servicing, but should also be looking at recalls. And when they get those notifications, we want to have a simplified process to facilitating that repair. So that's why we do things like have a centralized call center that will answer all their questions and even complete the appointment scheduling. So I think the answer is, rather than regulations and complexity, is to offer something that's a little bit more appealing to the average consumer.
Okay. And you got a lot of BDCs that are coming back online. Can they play a part in getting this handled and getting this done?
Yeah, no, for sure. We're often to some degree viewed by the BDC when they first hear about recall masters, like, oh, you offload all of these calls onto your call center. And yeah, that's true. Of course, the average call for a recall, when that consumer calls in, is about 15 minutes, just to let you know. So that's something that when your BDC has to manage that, it's very resource intensive and pulls you away from some other activities. So the first thing that we do is try to, alert the BDC staff that, there's ways that you can utilize this recall data that we provide. But as far as, just handling the inbound inquiries, that's better left to a call center that's focused solely on recall management. So we've reduced those call times. We've coordinated all the communications so that it's simplified for the consumer and gets right at the heart of what the consumer is looking for, and simplifying the message around what a particular recall might be about, so that it facilitates the repair. And that's really, at the end of the day, that's what we want. We want to encourage these consumers to come in. So making that a simple process does yield much higher returns. So at the end of the day, yeah, and the BDC can still play a part, like whether it's using that Market Smart report to chase down vehicles that are sitting on another a lot, or using recall data to go back through their service declines for the last 6 months and call every single individual who brought their car in for servicing and yet still has an open recall. So when those service declines occur, you can invite them back into the dealership, not only to attend to the recall, but to check in on whether they had that that additional service accomplished, or whether they'd like it done now. So
Right.
lots of opportunity for BDCs, and we enjoy creating that opportunity for them.
Yeah, I really like that philosophy that you have. In your mind, do you think the problem's getting worse or is it getting better?
Yeah, recalls. Yeah, I mean, the data really reflects it, that more dealers and more consumers are taking action on the recalls. But the numbers are still well below healthy rates. So year after year,
That's good.
We're piling these unrepaired recalls on top of the previous year's unrepaired recalls. So the scariest variable for me is that there's going to be this exponential growth that comes from software and electronics recalls.
Right.
And the pervasive use of technology to govern driving and braking and vehicle operation. These are really scary scenarios that can play out if those recalls get out of control. And you think about 1 in 4 vehicles on the road having a recall, a dangerous recall. If some of those involve, key vehicle operations, we're really heading into the dark woods.
Well, yeah, a lot of vehicles have more technology, computers, and all that stuff. So it's not a mechanical failure now; it's more of a software issue or a computer issue, and that is the brains behind the whole operation of a
Right.
vehicle now, right? So
Right, and we haven't even gotten into things like self-driving vehicles.
oh my goodness, no.
So we don't want to touch that just yet. But yeah, as you can imagine, we want to get in front of this thing.
Let's leave that for a future podcast down the road. Okay.
Got it.
So give me a glimpse of the future. Since we kind of touched upon it with, self-driving vehicles, a glimpse of the future. How will recalls really transform dealership operation?
One, in many respects, the future's already here, right? We've got a shortage on parts, a lack of technicians, but some positive things like the introduction of pickup and drop off, mobile repair, on and on. Some of the things that we thought would be happening at some point, they're happening now. And it was really kind of maybe the pandemic that accelerated some of that change. But the question is, whether we adopt these processes as the new normal, or do we go back to the way we used to do it and lose some of these customers that we've spent the last year and a half reclaiming, and we're going to lose them back to those independent repair shops. So I really would encourage the dealership community not to return to the pre-pandemic process, but rather look forward as far as the opportunities ahead. I mean, outside the dealership, I think you're going to see some more regulation. Yeah. I think the government, the government's going to probably get more actively involved. I see more state DMVs looking to aggregate owner data across maybe a more national database as opposed to the state stuff. There's even some warranty and reimbursement and technician compensation that just got passed out of the state of Illinois. I mean, it's a world of change right now, but I think a lot of that change is really good and presents a positive outlook that our community really wants to get behind this and find solutions.
That's interesting. Okay. Well, we're almost out of time here. So let's do the 3 takeaways from this episode in your mind that anyone at the dealership level that's listening to this podcast, an agent, a vendor, a dealer principal, can really take away from these questions that were asked of you, and kind of summarize some 3 takeaways from that.
Yeah, I think the simple 3 is, it never hurts to talk. Feel free to reach out to me. I mean, I don't like to think of myself as a sales guy. I'm trying to facilitate solutions. And a lot of times dealers hate to talk to vendors because they think it's always about a sale. Right. And that's not true. I think, even with our team that is out there active regionally, it's more about education and sharing the kind of success that dealers like yourself in your markets like yours, brands like yours, what are they doing to be successful? And I think just being open to the conversation. I don't think any of our regional teams expect that one conversation is going to close it all. So we don't even talk about things like pricing and contractual commitments, that kinds of stuff. We'll leave it for another day. We just really want to facilitate the information being shared. So one, not being afraid to have a conversation and talk and review. I think number two is there's going to be more of what we've been experiencing, plus more on the horizon. This problem isn't going away. Hopefully, federal and state legislators don't get involved with mandating, or regulating too much of our industry. But I am going to predict that over the next 5 years that you're going to see additional regulation if we don't get a handle on this. And probably the third piece is try to complete a more simplified process for the consumer, from A to Z, what it takes for them to not only get notified about the recall, but to have it ultimately repaired. Compliance is key. That's the cornerstone for all of this. So anything that you can do to simplify that process from A to Z, we want to encourage. So
I really like those takeaways, Sean. That's awesome. This episode has been really great. If you want to deliver a legendary customer experience that keeps the customer coming back to you and encourage them to invite their friends and family into your establishment, then you've caught the gold standard customer service vision. Do you want more cohesive teams that deliver a higher level of consumer service that will result in more revenue for your dealership? We provide the tools, knowledge, and training needed to unlock the potential of your dealership. For more information on this topic and others, or submit a question, or to be a guest on the show, feel free to send me an email at csmith@nationalautocare.com. Sean, this has been really great, eye-opening, some stuff I didn't know about recalls. I really appreciate you being on this episode. And just like I asked you a few weeks ago, will you please come back?
My pleasure, Corey. Thank you again for having us.
Thank you for watching and listening to National Auto Care's Fixed Ops 5 with Corey Smith, powered by Passion. Be sure to watch and listen to the next episode on the 5th and 20th of every month.